Have you ever created a barkeep that you were sure was going to charm the pants off your players? Maybe even become their favorite tag-along NPC, only for your party to hit them with the good ol' hi bye and never look back? How dare they? So you try harder. You add more quirks, more backstory, more trauma, more depth, and yet the results pretty much stay the same. Yeah, that's because your NPCs don't need depth. The thing that actually gets players invested, that's clarity. So today, we're talking about what clarity looks like for NPCs, the 7 NPC archetypes, and then I'm going to share my quick and easy 3-step formula for creating NPCs that your players actually give a shit about. So when I say clarity, what am I talking about? I mean that if your players don't immediately understand who this NPC is to them, why they matter right now, or why they might even matter later, then that NPC might as well not exist at all. The idea that NPCs need depth isn't addressing the real problem, because what players are really doing is looking subconsciously for clear hints. They're asking, what can this person do in our story? So if the party is focused on slaying a dragon, and they have no clue that the friendly shopkeep has a basement full of rare magic items, just hidden away from the world, it doesn't matter how funny or tragic or fully fleshed out they are. The party is absolutely going to go bounce and look for someone that can actually help them with their goals. So how do we make sure that NPCs are clear and easy to understand? That's where my 3-step formula comes in. First, you're going to want to decide whether this NPC is an ally or an antagonist. So allies are NPCs whose goals match or could match in the future the goals of the party. On the other side, antagonists are NPCs who have goals that create friction with the party, goals that clash or compete with them. And this isn't a rigid category. NPCs can change their mind about a party during interaction or over the course of several, but starting with one clear direction helps players instantly understand how easy or how difficult interacting with this NPC is going to be. And also, just to be clear, antagonist doesn't necessarily mean villain here. It can be as simple as they're skeptical, cautious, or even protective, and therefore harder for the PCs to win over. So once you know whether this NPC starts as an ally or an antagonist, the next step is figuring out how they might become important in the story. And that's where the 7 NPC archetypes come in. So this is central to the whole clarity thing. These archetypes show the possible narrative game role that this NPC can play for the party. And it's not based on quirks or backstory, but on what potential value they might bring to players. And these are directly inspired by the monomyth, or more commonly known as The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. I was reading a book that had a section on using some of them as a guide to create NPCs for video games. I'll link to that book below. But I decided to further adapt that idea for tabletop games. Because it's a little different. We want players' choices to drive the story, not cutscenes. No scripting here. So the first archetype we have is the hero. Now, you might be thinking, wait, aren't the players the heroes? Yes, but also sometimes no. Why are you asking me so many questions? So yeah, the players are the main heroes here. They're the ones driving the story, making choices, the ones the spotlight is shining upon. 100% agree! But in some campaigns, certain NPCs can also function as secondary heroes. Characters who are on their own heroic journeys that can intersect with the party's journey. So this character will probably exclusively be an ally, and I think DMs should use it sparingly lest they venture into DMPC territory. But Cursive Strahd is a campaign that pulls off this archetype in a way that players usually enjoy. Irina and Ismark are NPCs who generate big, memorable story momentum of their own, but the party can choose to join up with them and stay with them, or honestly, they can still walk away and do their own thing. And that's a very important distinction to make. If the players engage with these two, they'll probably experience more Strahd and Rahadin moments directly, and if they don't, the story shifts a little bit because the players have now chosen their own path. So if you use the hero archetype, make sure the NPC's goals align closely with the goals of the party in the campaign, and do it without them making decisions for the party or kind of taking the wheel. The next archetype is the Herald. The Herald is an NPC who signals trouble, change, or a choice that could be coming. They make the PCs aware of potential conflict. and they don't literally have to go shout about it. And the conflict doesn't need to be something big and grand. But this is one of those archetypes where there's a huge difference between the tabletop roleplay version and other things like movies, video games, books. Because while in other forms of media, a single Herald moment is all but guaranteed, in TTRPGs, the players can walk right past it. So the Herald is really the herald to adventure hooks. Staying with Curse of Strahd, a great non-town shouter type of herald is the group of NPCs in the stockades wearing donkey masks when the players first arrive in Vallaki. They don't say a word, but the mere mention of them directs attention to the fact that something is in fact off here. This gives players a lead they can choose to ignore, to pursue, or even to potentially misinterpret entirely, which is exactly what a good herald should do. Signal danger, change, or opportunity, but all without forcing the party to go down any particular path. Another classic archetype is the Mentor, and this archetype has BGE, Big Gandalf energy. I'm sorry, I really couldn't help it. In movies, these are usually characters that are older and wiser than the hero, but in D&D, Mentor doesn't need to mean old wizard with a pipe. It can literally be any NPC that knows more than the players do and is willing to help them grow. And mentors can support the party in three main ways. They can teach, so they can share warnings, tactic, knowledge, lore, anything that helps the party prepare, survive, or outmaneuver their enemies. They can give gifts. They may see potential in the party and offer a meaningful gift like a special magic item. They can give it in the form of healing, safe shelter, or even supplies. And unlike a patron, the mentor's help isn't transactional. It's an investment in the party's success, not a quid pro quo type of situation. But mentors can also guide. They can help the party understand what's at stake, keep them focused when things start to go sideways, or even offer more moral guidance if the party starts to drift into are we the baddies types of territory. In Curse of Strahd, Van Richten is a classic mentor type of archetype. You know, depending on how long he's around for. And again, this is one of those archetypes that's almost exclusively an ally just by its nature. So after the PCs themselves, they're a great NPC to be a target of the villain. My personal favorite archetype is the Threshold Guardian. This is one of the most versatile archetypes on this list. The Threshold Guardian is an NPC who blocks the party's progress. They represent an early test before the party faces the real threat, the big bad. So you can really have a bunch of these. And I think this description of it makes it sound like the Threshold Guardian has to be an antagonist. And while henchmen and cronies do make great guardians, I don't think that's actually a requirement for this. The key is obstruction, not necessarily whether their goals are aligned with the players. So yeah, if they aren't in the way somehow, they're not really a guardian. But if they are a guardian, they might still be invested in the players succeeding with accomplishing their goal. They're not mutually exclusive, and hopefully my example in step 3 will kind of show that. But the Threshold Guardian, what they're really doing is giving the players a chance to practice or prove something. Whether it's through using deception, diplomacy, stealth, magic, teamwork, strategy, they're giving them a chance to practice skills that they'll need for when things get serious. One of my favorite examples is actually from one of my home games. There was a rival faction NPC who was guarding the party's kidnapped mentor. He naturally started as an antagonist, but after the party captured him and used Charm Person, he accidentally became a surprisingly beloved helper and a gateway into the main adventure. But like I said, a Threshold Guardian doesn't need to be a henchman or a mini-boss. So maybe your guardian could be the skeptical protector of a sacred sword. Someone who's only willing to hand it over once the party can prove they're ready. Another versatile one is the Trickster. This archetype is one that brings levity, surprise, and a little bit of silliness to the story through comic relief. And so I think a more apt nickname for this one is the Comic. But they're the NPC who breaks the tension, interrupts the emotional heaviness, or pulls the party out of a spiral with something completely unexpected, something totally out of left field. I think the funny thing about this, though, is that a lot of DMs accidentally include this one already and are always surprised, like when players pick up on them, right? They're the NPC that was panic named on the spot, who collects a surprisingly large amount of dented spoons and has a weird, funny voice. And the players are literally obsessed with them. Why? Because in that moment, the table didn't need more lore or a magic item that would give them the upper hand. They needed a laugh. So when a session or an arc has been bleak, heavy, or super high stress, dropping in a silly, chaotic, clumsy, or oddly passionate NPC, that can really reset the emotions at the table. And with that levity, it can really give players the energy to dive back into those more serious parts of the story. And if your players have ever fallen in love with an NPC who definitely did not exist 5 minutes prior, tell me about them in the comments below. I love hearing about them. So the Shapeshifter is an NPC archetype that the players aren't sure about yet. They're meant to spark doubt, suspicion, and those heated table debates about whether the party is being played or not. My favorite. These NPCs usually show up with plot twists, red herrings, divided loyalties, or possible betrayals, but also as unlikely allies at times. An important note though, shapeshifters only feel fun and fair when players have enough information to make informed choices. If they don't see clues, tension, odd behaviors, or mixed motives, then it can feel a lot more like story is happening to them, not because of them. So don't worry about wowing your players with twists. Worry about creating situations where they have to do things like weigh whether they can cut ties with that healer based on the weird suspicions and feelings they have about them, or other quandaries like that. So if you want a friendly NPC to maybe become an antagonist or vice versa, you'll need to plant small believable signals ahead of time. Maybe it's a private argument the party overhears, a suspicious letter or coded message, a moment where the NPC looks afraid to speak, or even a story they tell twice, but slightly different each time. And these clues don't have to confirm anything. They just need to invite player interpretation in. That way their trust or mistrust becomes their choice and not your big reveal. And our final archetype before we move on to step 3 is our villain. And I actually have a whole entire video already on villain design and villain archetypes, so I'll keep this one short and link to that at the end. But this is the NPC who's the primary source of all of these trials that the players are going through. Any obstacle, danger, pressures for the party usually link back to them. And they're probably the one archetype that sits squarely in the antagonist category from the start. Here's the thing though. If you want a super engaging player-driven campaign, your villain should start loose and flexible, not fully locked in. So when I begin a campaign, the only thing I really solidify about my big bad is their core goal and how that goal threatens something the players care about. And these are the only things I invest in because they're enough for me to create that one-page campaign guide. I've shown some examples before in my World Building 101 video, but this gives you flexibility because you don't even really have to decide who your villain is before you really learn enough about who your heroes are. For example, the party's village has disappeared from the material plane. Who caused it? A powerful crystal is rumored to grant impossible magic. Who in this town is willing to do anything to get it? For each of these prompts, I always have a few different people it might be. I make myself do this even if I do think it is one person, because this makes it a little more fun. Starting a little bit more on that mysterious side allows me to playtest possibilities. I can watch who the players are really reacting to, and then shape my villain to match the emotional target that they care about. And that really highlights the beauty of TTRPGs over video games and movies and books. As DMs, we don't have to pre-script the truth. We can discover it with the players and make a great villain that feels personal and not shoehorned in. So once you've chosen an archetype to make that NPC's purpose clear, you're ready for step 3. Add a very quick trope or a character key to help guide how you roleplay them. The goal here isn't necessarily to flesh them out, but to simply give your brain a quick handle to grab onto. Something you can lean into or twist or entirely subvert via roleplay without burning prep time. If the NPC becomes important later, then you can flesh them out if it's really necessary at that point. But you don't need to do this before you know the players actually care. So how do tropes help us with this clarity issue? A trope gives you instant flavor for tone, choices, behavior, and emotional framing. So here's an example. I mostly watch horror movies, and one trope I love from them is the concept of the innocent. This is usually someone young, gentle, or otherwise unassuming. And they might end up in a role as a somewhat sacrificial lamb, as someone who sees and notices things that others don't, or even as a surprise threat when subverting the trope. There's range to this one, and that's what makes it a lot of fun for me. Now let's smash that trope with the Threshold Guardian archetype. So like I was saying earlier, this can be an ally, not an antagonist. So if I were to write a quick note on this one, this NPC would become a frightened child who knows something about the monster, but maybe won't speak about it unless they feel safe and protected by the party. Because of the Threshold Guardian part, this immediately gives something actionable for the party to do, while giving you, the DM, through this trope, all of the knowledge you really need to roleplay them. And this same trope can play very differently if this Guardian is an antagonist instead. They might give the party misleading clues. They might secretly be helping the monster survive. They might be charmed, cursed, desperate, or even just lonely. What if they see that monster as their only friend? Whole different ballgame. But still quick and easy to figure out how to play as the DM. So hopefully you can see how powerful this system can be once you start thinking in these archetypes. These don't have to be for every shopkeep, every weird rando. But if you need something meaningful on the fly, it makes NPC creation way faster and clearer, and honestly a lot more fun. And if you like this video and want to do more LEGO world building, as I tend to call it, check out my video on the 7 villain archetypes and the 12 quest types. I'll link to them at the end of this video, but they pair really well with this one. And also, I'll be at PAX Unplugged this weekend. I'm ridiculously excited to try new games and to meet cool people and to probably buy way too many dice. It's happening. I'm finally starting to turn into a little bit of a dice goblin. Y'all warned me and you were right. But if you see me, please come say hi. I love meeting other people and talking shop with other DMs, so see you there.